We are counting down the 10 most ingenious meals that helped Black families survive the 1970s inflation crisis, each one crafted for under $1 a serving. From quick fried snacks that stretched dimes to multi-day dishes built from scraps and pure creativity, this ranking reveals how necessity transformed the kitchen into a battleground for survival. Which meal delivered the greatest stretch, flavor, and resilience during hard times? Let us start the countdown with number 10. Number 10 on the list, fried fillers and fritters. When the fridge and pantry looked bare, a handful of cornmeal or flour was all it took to keep hunger at bay. Okra fritters, cornmeal patties, and whatever vegetable was on hand got mixed into quick batters, then dropped into a hot skillet with just enough oil to sizzle. These were not full meals, but they filled the gap between dinner and payday. Leftover batter from Sunday's fish fry or a few spoonfuls of garden okra never went to waste. They became fast, golden bites that kept kids quiet and bellies from rumbling. In neighborhoods where bakery bread cost more than a bag of flour, making a batch of fritters cost pennies. For some families, fritter night was a weekly ritual, sometimes even a treat with a pinch of sugar or a sprinkle of chopped onion. Church bazaars and community events sold plates of these fried snacks for extra cash, but at home, they were the first line of defense when the main course ran short. Fast, hot, and satisfying, fritters bought a little time until the next big pot could be put on the stove. Summer gardens and end-of-season sales brought a brief window of abundance, but nothing lasted long unless it could be preserved. Black families turned to pickling and quick brines to stretch the life of okra, cucumbers, and peppers. Vinegar, still under $1 a gallon for most of the decade, became a kitchen staple not just for flavor, but for survival. A handful of salt, a splash of 5% vinegar, and whatever fresh produce was on hand could fill reused jelly jars with quick pickled vegetables. These jars lined pantry shelves or were tucked into the fridge, offering bursts of tang and crunch when winter meals ran thin. Quick pickled okra, for example, could last from 1 to 3 months when brined right, following USDA guidelines that filtered through Black community cookbooks and cooperative extension pamphlets. The salt and vinegar barrier kept spoilage at bay, even in reused jars. For families who could not afford new canning sets, every empty jelly jar became a precious tool for time-shifting flavor from summer to the coldest months. With each lid sealed tight, a little bit of summer was saved for the days when the only green in the kitchen came from a memory. Rice was the backbone of a stretched budget, able to turn pocket change into a meal that lasted for days. In the 1970s, a 5-pound bag of rice often cost less than $1.25, making it one of the cheapest ways to fill a pot and feed a family. Black mothers and grandmothers mastered one-pot rice casseroles, dishes like red rice colored with tomato paste and stretched with onions or bell peppers, or dirty rice, where a handful of minced chicken livers or gizzards flavored the whole batch. Even the smallest amount of meat could be chopped fine and cooked down with spices, giving the illusion of abundance when there was hardly any protein to go around. These casseroles were not just about taste, they multiplied calories, filling plates and bellies when everything else ran short. Community cookbooks from the decade are full of recipes for rice-based meals that made a little bit go a long way. A single pot could be reheated for lunch, then again for dinner, stretching a few cents worth of ingredients across several days. In kitchens where every penny mattered, rice casseroles became a quiet form of economic resistance, making sure no one went to bed hungry even as prices kept climbing. A can of Spam or Vienna sausage on sale for under 40 cents could mean the difference between a meal and an empty plate. Black mothers knew these shelf-stable meats were not just for emergencies, they were survival tools, especially when fresh protein was out of reach. Grocery stores in black neighborhoods from Detroit to Atlanta kept stacks of Spam and Vienna sausages behind the counter, often running weekly specials that let families stretch a single can across an entire casserole. Canned protein did not offer much in the way of nutrition compared to fresh meat, but it brought a kind of comfort and dignity to the table. Sliced thin and folded into creamy noodles, baked into rice casseroles, or chopped into potato salad, these meats gave the illusion of abundance. A single can, padded with starch and sauce, could feed 4 or more people. Recipes from Black church cookbooks in the 1970s show how a can of Vienna sausage, a cup of rice, and a handful of frozen peas could become a Sunday dinner on a Wednesday night. The secret was in the binder. Cans of condensed soup, a splash of evaporated milk, or even leftover gravy thickened everything into a hearty bake. These casseroles masked scarcity, turning a bit of meat into something that felt like a full meal. For children, seeing meat on the table was a psychological boost, even if the protein was mostly an idea. Canned protein casseroles did not just fill bellies, they kept hope alive, one can at a time. Hot water cornbread meant survival when the pantry was nearly empty. It started with a scoop of cornmeal, sometimes white, sometimes yellow, poured into a bowl. Boiling water was mixed in by hand, no measuring spoons, just instinct and memory guiding the way. Salt, maybe a pinch of sugar if there was any left, and the batter was ready. The real magic happened when that batter hit a skillet of hot fat. The sizzle filled the kitchen, and the smell promised something warm and filling, even if there was little else to eat. Mothers and grandmothers learned the texture by feel, teaching daughters and sons to shape each patty just right, never too thick, never too thin. In 5 minutes, the outside turned crisp and golden, while the inside stayed soft and steaming. Hot water cornbread cost pennies to make, and there was no need for eggs, milk, or yeast, just cornmeal and whatever was on hand. It could be fried up fast to stretch a meal, or served as the main event when meat and greens ran out. This bread was more than a side. It was a gesture of care, handed down across generations. Even when the rest of dinner was thin, a stack of hot water cornbread on the table meant nobody went to bed hungry. It filled bellies, soothed nerves, and reminded everyone at the table that love and resourcefulness could turn almost nothing into enough. The story of government cheese begins in the warehouses of Washington, where mountains of surplus dairy sat untouched while families across Black America struggled to keep food on the table. By the early 1980s, the government started distributing 5-pound blocks of processed cheese to low-income households, a policy solution born more from farm politics than from any real concern for hunger. But once those blocks crossed county lines, Black mothers and grandmothers turned them into something greater than a handout. In kitchens from Detroit to Birmingham, the arrival of that cheese meant a new kind of mac and cheese. The block was dense, high in fat, and stubborn to slice, but it melted into a creamy sauce that stretched a single box of macaroni into a meal for a crowd. Some grated it by hand, others shaved off thick slabs and dropped them into boiling noodles with a splash of canned milk or a pat of margarine. The result was a pan of mac and cheese that filled bellies and lifted spirits, even when the rest of dinner was thin. Queues for government cheese snaked around churches and community centers, especially in majority Black counties. The cheese carried a stigma. Everyone knew where it came from, but the dish it became was a source of quiet pride. Children bragged about their mama's mac, not knowing the story behind that orange brick. For families with no savings, no cushion, and no choice, government cheese mac and cheese was more than a meal. It was a lesson in turning policy leftovers into comfort, dignity, and a taste of abundance for under $1 a plate. Collard greens simmered with a single neck bone were a staple that carried families through the week, one bowl at a time. In Black kitchens, especially through the leanest years of the 1970s, meat wasn't the centerpiece, it was the secret behind the flavor. A neck bone, bought for pennies, transformed a pot of collards into something that tasted rich, even when there was not much else to stretch. The greens, washed and stripped of their tough stems, went into a deep pot with water, a splash of vinegar, and that single bone. They simmered for hours, soaking up every bit of smoky fat and salt the meat had to give. The neck bone itself was never meant to be divided among plates. It was left in the pot, flavoring each serving until there was nothing left but bone and memory. A big batch of collard greens, cooked on Sunday, could last until Wednesday or even Thursday, reheated alongside whatever starch was on hand, rice, cornbread, or leftover grits. The pot was always ready, waiting on the back of the stove for whoever came through the door hungry. Vinegar brightened the greens, cutting through the richness and making each bite feel fresh, even after days of reheating. For children, greens meant vitamins and fiber their bodies needed, a rare burst of green in a world of beige starches and canned meats. For mothers and grandmothers, they were insurance. A way to fill plates was something nourishing, no matter how thin the grocery budget had stretched. In kitchens where every dollar had to do the work of three, collard greens with a single neck bone became a lesson in how to make a meal last and a reminder that care could be tasted even when meat was only a memory in the broth. Dry beans, pinto, black, and navy became the backbone of survival in Black kitchens during the 1970s inflation crisis. A single pound of dried beans, bought for less than 35 cents in the early part of the decade, could yield 6 to 8 cups of cooked food. That meant a pot big enough to last for days, providing both calories and protein when meat was out of reach. Beans were not just cheap, they were reliable. Unlike fresh meat or dairy, dry beans did not spoil in a hot kitchen or lose their value if payday was late. Mothers and grandmothers knew the rhythm by heart. They sorted the beans, soaked them overnight, then simmered low and slow with whatever seasoning was on hand, sometimes an onion, sometimes just salt and pepper. For every cup of cooked beans, there was about 15 grams of protein, enough to help growing kids when the rest of the meal was mostly starch. Bulk sacks of beans lined the shelves at corner stores and church pantries, and a 5-pound bag could stretch across a week's worth of lunches and dinners. The process took patience, not money. Soaking overnight softened the beans, saving on cooking fuel, and making them easier to digest. Simmering for hours filled the house with the promise of something hearty, even if the pot held no meat at all. Black bean and pinto stews became the anchor for countless meals, paired with rice, cornbread, or whatever greens could be found. Leftovers were never wasted. Beans thickened into spreads for bread or were added to soups when the pot started running low. In a decade when the price of groceries seemed to double overnight, dry beans offered a kind of security that few other foods could match. They were the quiet workhorses of the kitchen, turning a handful of coins into days of nourishment. Leftovers weren't just an afterthought, they were a strategy, carefully planned and executed like a quiet science. After every big pot of beans or greens, the first move was portioning. Ladles measured out tomorrow's lunches, the rest packed into empty margarine tubs or jelly jars, each relabeled with scraps of masking tape and a ballpoint note. Tuesday beans, Thursday stew. These containers lined the fridge shelves, stacked and rotated to make sure nothing spoiled and every bit was used. Breakfast the next day might start with a scoop of yesterday's beans, mashed and fried into crispy patties, or a spoonful of greens stirred into scrambled eggs. Stretching meant thinking 3 meals ahead. If the stew was thick on Sunday, by Wednesday it could be thinned with a little water or a scoop of rice, and transformed into soup. Nothing was wasted, not even the broth, which could be poured over cornbread or grits for a quick meal before school. The work wasn't just about saving food, it was about saving time and fuel, too. Cooking a big batch on Sunday meant the stove stayed off most of the week, cutting down on gas or electric bills. Mothers and grandmothers kept a mental inventory of every container, knowing which ones needed to be eaten first and which could wait. This invisible labor, labeling, rotating, reimagining, kept the kitchen running and the family fed, even when the grocery money ran out long before payday. Every reused tub, every carefully rationed scoop was proof that survival depended on more than just recipes. It was a kind of everyday math, a quiet genius, multiplying one meal into 3 or 4, and making sure nothing, especially hope, ever got thrown away. A single smoked ham hock bought for less than $1 could anchor a pot of beans that lasted 3 or even 4 days. In kitchens from Mississippi to Detroit, this was the meal that brought together everything Black families had learned about survival. The ham hock itself was never meant to be eaten whole. It was dropped into a pot of dry beans, pinto, navy, or black-eyed, along with an onion and a pinch of black pepper. As the pot simmered for hours, the smoky fat and marrow melted into the beans, turning water and legumes into a rich, savory broth. The hock flavored every spoonful, stretching its power across meal after meal, even when the meat was stripped bare by the end of the week. Mothers and grandmothers called this the stretch meal. Oral histories echo the same refrain. We would buy one ham hock for 79 cents and make it feed us for 4 days. That pot was never just dinner, it was lunch the next day, then breakfast with a scoop of beans over grits, and finally, the thickened dregs mashed onto a slice of toast or cornbread. In the South, it was tradition, and in the North, it was a memory of home carried up the train lines by families searching for work. The beans did more than fill bellies. They delivered protein, iron, and warmth to growing children, all from a handful of coins and a few hours of patience. The ham hock bean pot was not just about thrift. It was a lesson in making flavor last, in turning scarcity into comfort, and in feeding a family with dignity when there was nothing left to cut from the budget. Each batch was planned days ahead, with leftovers carefully rationed and containers labeled for the week. The story of the ham hock bean pot is the story of Black survival itself, resourceful, communal, and rooted in memory. This meal stands at the top of the list, not just for its unmatched stretch, but because it represents the heart of kitchen ingenuity. In every simmering pot, there was proof that love and planning could turn almost nothing into enough. Across every meal, one truth stands out. Survival was built on collective ingenuity, not abundance. Black families in the 1970s made scarcity into strength, forging community and legacy through kitchen creativity. That pattern endures. When systems fail, resourcefulness becomes resistance. These dollar-stretching meals aren't just history, they are reminders that resilience is a recipe passed down, still feeding hope today. Which meal would you try? Drop your answer in the comments.